All right, we're at the final day of the very first Comic-Con Honolulu. Yeah. Woo! Well, not woo that it's the last, but woo that it's the first day year. Anyway, I have a very special treat for you today. We're going to get things started with not only a beautiful, but a very bright, graduated with honors actor, choreographer, director. She's not a doctor, but she played one on TV. Let me welcome Gates McFadden.
Hello, hello, hello. Sean, can you hear me out there? Okay, great. It's so funny because when we're sitting, fabulous. I'm going to ask you a couple questions, okay? Anyway, hi everybody. Can I just say how fantastic it is to be back here in Oahu, in Honolulu, which I adore. I have fallen in love with this place because after Star Trek, I know we're here to talk mainly about Star Trek, but I have to just tell you why I'm so in love with this place. So during Star Trek, you know, this is like we were behind the table, but do we want to go on? This is like too formal. Too formal.
Now, the last time I did that, I got a shot of my crotch.
Oh,
maybe they
see.
can widen the angle a little bit.
Or
sit
else,
back.
you know, I mean, get a good shot. Okay, all right.
Make it we can do a little choreography, a little something.
We can do that, you know? Yeah. Oh, God, now you've done it. You've wrecked the zoom lens. Okay, that's going to come. No,
I could move the table back.
No,
We want nothing
she's
between.
adjusting it. She's adjusting it, right? Yeah. The face is
good.
up here.
Perfect.
The crotch is down there. Okay. Anyway, so when you do Star Trek, not only are you in your spandex jumpsuit and your boots that are tight, and the spandex, I don't know if you all know, because I notice not too many people wear that kind of polyester spandex here. They have more now of a cotton blend, but we had the polyester blend. So when it was cold, it was frickin' freezing. And when it was hot, you were sweating like anything, and it couldn't get out. So you're just kind of in your own sweat. So anyway, and you'd be like on what we called Planet Hell, which was stage 16. And, you know, it'd be the planet du jour, and you would have the dust and they'd be putting stuff in with the fans, and we're like, oh my God, breathing that stuff. And you're inside so much of the time, except when you go out to like Joshua Tree or Bronson Canyon and you're shooting in one of those places, and then it's hotter than hell, and you're sweating. Okay, so the job I get after Star Trek is to come to Oahu, which I had never been to. And I was like, oh God, that place must be so touristy. Oh, I don't know. Really? Hawaii? No, it's gotta be. Okay, I'll do the job, right? They're paying me wonderful money. My son is 3 years old. And I'm like, okay, I'm tired of these 16-hour, 18-hour days. I'm gonna go and shoot the series Marker with Andy Bumatai, who is local, who I love, and Richard Grieco, and it was really, you know, gonna happen, Stephen Cannell Productions. So we get here, and they put me up in I found a house that we could lease that was the same price as the hotel they had me in. So just check this out. It was on Diamond Head, on the ocean cliff. I can walk down to the beach, which is a protected reef, okay? We go, my 3-year-old and I, every day, like looking for shells, looking at all the creatures, sea cucumbers, all of that. So that's where I had to spend the evenings and the mornings. And then my character was this well, it was so silly. She was like this ridiculously wealthy, bitchy kind of woman who lived in like the place that I think it was Kaiser. What's Hawaii Kai? What was the guy who developed that whole area? It was his house. It was his old house that then was bought, like that's where President John F. Kennedy came with Jackie. They had this sunken bar outside. That's where we had to film when we were doing my scenes, okay? And I could take my 3-year-old and we could be in the little pool because there were so many jacuzzis and so many koi ponds. And so, you can imagine how hard that was. And then we would be shooting and I'd have to drive up in the Mercedes convertible. So hard. And get out of the car and then go. And then we'd be doing the scene and they'd say, whoop, cut. We've got whales breaching behind you. We have to wait till the whales stop breaching behind you. And I'm like, oh my God. It was paradise, okay? I'm sorry, that was planet paradise here. And it was the greatest, happiest gig I ever had in my life. No, it wasn't Star Trek. It wasn't profound and trying to really build a great, culture and community. I just had a narcissistic, egotistical, fabulous 9 months here, okay?
At any point, did they make you wear polyester?
No. I mean, they put me in clothes that I would never afford to buy myself. It was like fantastic. And I mean, the idea really was that and this is actually the truth. I mean, a lot of that, it was great. But what I actually truthfully loved, my son went to school here. I loved the people. People were so family-oriented here. You would go out for picnics in the park. We had the greatest times and met people who'd be having their birthday picnics or their weekly picnics. We would go and watch the grandfathers who would have these model boat sailboats, and they'd have races in the canal and do different things. I just thought it is a fantastic place. And I love the aloha spirit. And I also learned a heck of a lot about the history of Hawaii, of which I knew nothing, really. I found out the whole story with the Bishop Estates, which was pretty provocative. I thought that was amazing. And then finally someone started to change that, because I'm like, well, wait a minute, if they're supposed to be taking care of the public schools, what's going on here? And now the schools are so much better, which is awesome to find out. I don't know, I think this is a very progressive island now, and I love it here. And I love the people who I've been meeting this weekend. You are all so welcoming and nice, and have very interesting lives and things that you do. A lot of you have shared what you do and things, and thank you. I really mean it. I'm not just sort of saying it. I truly, truly am happy to be back for this short weekend and be a part of this. So, aloha.
I think my battery's dying. And I'm sure everyone appreciates you bringing what otherwise would be exclusive to the mainland all the way out here to paradise.
Oh, well, please.
Right?
I'm so lucky. And I will tell all of my friends to come, and they would all love it because, I mean, what's not to like? And what's funny is I had been asked to do some Star Trek conventions that year when I was doing Marker, and people were like, what's wrong with her? Bitch, go and do the convention. You're right on the island. But the truth is that it was my first chance to really have a lot of time with my son. I didn't have to film as many hours, and I had great times with him. We hung out at the Polynesian Cultural Center. He started to learn ancient male hula. I mean, he just flipped over the ancient male hula. So did I, frankly. But, whoo, honey. I know why those missionaries wanted to shut that down, because, I mean, it's very powerful warrior stuff. I was blown away by it. As a choreographer, I really loved. I started to go to the hula festivals that would come to LA. I thought it's beautiful, beautiful, the dance around here. Anyway, now let's jump into the future and talk about Star Trek. So anyway, thank you all for being fans of the series. I think when I started the show, I didn't have any idea. I've worked in my life, I've been fortunate enough to work with Gene Roddenberry and Jim Henson. And they are two people, really, two people who really understood something about what the culture wanted in a way, to give positivity to people who are watching things and entertain in a way that makes you think as well and that's fun. And it took me a while to get it, for both of them, actually. I mean, well, Kermit, I fell in love with Kermit immediately, but For Star Trek, I hadn't watched the original series, believe it or not. I would see the posters in poster shops, so I knew who Kirk was, and I knew who, Bones. I knew that there were these characters, but I had not watched the show. And I was the person, I had actually turned down doing the show twice to go to a play with Linda Hunt for like no money. I mean, it was like, what are you, nuts? But I was, because I was like, oh, theater. And when I was fortunate enough to be asked by Gene again, no, really, you should be doing this. And I thought, yeah, maybe I should. It's sort of, I believe things come your way, and I was very lucky to have that offer like a wave come back to me 3 times, and I finally went, yeah, I'm going to catch that wave. And it has truly changed my life, clearly. I was frightened about being on a TV show for a long time and thought, ooh, I don't know, and conventions, what do you mean? It was like strange to me. But now I get it, because it isn't at all about me. It's about this wonderful vision of the future, and it's about the role models that the writers and Gene and everybody put together. And it does make a difference. And I have seen it, having traveled around the world doing conventions and seen the grandmother, the mother, the oldest daughter, and the grandchild, and they all are watching and saying, yeah, this has really changed. It's something we watch together, and we actually love this show together. So I feel very, very fortunate, very blessed that I have had the chance to learn more and more about the impact of Star Trek through the years of doing conventions and everything.
Yeah, I think it's clear that Gene and Jim had a vision for equality, acceptance. How much of that was an active discussion on set?
I don't think it was so much, well, with Jim always, he was active about it, and he would, he also was so funny. Oh my God, did he have a sense of humor, and so did Frank Oz. I mean, they were always cracking up everybody on the sets, and they'd always hire hilarious people. I mean, my first little job with him was playing a secretary to Dabney Coleman, who's one of the funniest people I've ever met. And he was just like improvising these hilarious but nasty things to my character. I mean, who was this little secretary who had like 3 lines, and I loved it. But the story I tell about Jim is, when you work with puppets and they're shooting it on camera, there's a pit. And so like Jim would be down in the pit, so I would just see Kermit, see? So like I'm back here and I'm playing the secretary, and it was my first like really film job of anything. I was like so nervous, right? I had like 1 line, 2 lines, and I'm going over it and I'm like thinking, and all of a sudden they said, let's take a break, everyone. And the place cleared like that. And so I was sitting here, and I didn't know I didn't even know about the craft service table yet, and so then I'm just sort of sitting there nervous, waiting to shoot the scene, and I noticed that Kermit's there, and Kermit is looking into this frame. There's a frame with some poster or something, but he can see his reflection, and Kermit is there, and he's going. Right? And I mean, but he's doing this, and I'm kind of like, okay, frog with the music. I'm doing my line, and I look over, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I just want to make sure I look good. And I'm like, what? And I actually started to talk to Kermit. And all of a sudden, and you're doing this, and you go, wait a minute, what, Jim? And that's the trick they play on every person who's never worked with the Muppet people. That's what they used to do, and I just totally fell for it. And that's the kind of people they are, as is enjoying life. Star Trek, we had to film so much in such a short time. I have the feeling that the first series was more fun and that, improvised. For our show, we had so many special effects, and they were so amazingly done, right? I mean, it was really a leap up for that time. And so there was a lot of pressure. It cost a lot of money to do each show. So we did fool around on the set, no problem. When we were all on the bridge together, yipes, but it was fun. But on the other hand, there was a little bit more pressure. And Gene wasn't around as much. He was older, and he was working with the writers and stuff at that time. But what an amazing, what an amazing man.
Wow. It's not easy being Gene. Sorry,
Oh,
dumb. We could maybe also, I'm sure
Take
there's
some
some questions burning to be asked out there. We have a nice man with a microphone probably running around. Oh, there he is. And do you have your first question already? Bingo.
So if you have a question, please raise your hand. I will come to you.
We got a
There we
couple
go.
over here. Lady in the bad wolf hat.
If you will stand for me. There we go. Oh man, I gotta duck under the camera.
I was also wondering this, but this is more a question for my mom.
A question what?
From my mom.
Okay,
'Cause
she's
she-
doing her mom's questions. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Just charge her for that. But
She wanted to know what was your favorite part about working with Patrick.
what was my favorite part in working with Patrick? Why, did she think I enjoyed working with Patrick? That good-looking bald man with a British accent who was supposed to be French? What was my favorite part? Oh, every part was my favorite. No, I mean, Patrick was great to work with. I don't know what my favorite part was. I loved, what I really respected about him is that in the first season in particular, there were things that that he and I both thought were racist and sexist. And I mean, a lot of people felt that way, but he was someone who would actually, like make the call, and I got into a lot of trouble for making the call. I got fired ultimately, but that was really pretty good. I thought he was savvy, having worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company and knowing how to sort of finesse things to get it changed. And I learned a lot from him on that level. I wish I'd known more, but I also just had it was really wonderful working with him and doing scenes that were different and plain subtext. I remember the very first scene we shot in the pilot. It was really powerful and wonderful. I think we just connected. We did have a chemistry, which was good. And so that was, I don't have any one little favorite part, I can't say, oh, it's when I used to lick his head. No, it didn't happen.
Alas. And you both have such strong theater backgrounds.
That's true, and I think that's true. That's a really good point. And actually that makes me think. One of the favorite things, good question, is Patrick directed some of us in a Tom Stoppard play called EGBDF, Every Good Boy Deserves Favor, and it's with an 80-piece orchestra. And Brent had the lead, Brent, Jonathan, Colin Meaney, myself, and Patrick. And Patrick also directed it, and he played this hilarious role. And we toured it in a couple of, we went to Chicago, Minneapolis, San Diego, or Orange County or something. I mean, it was really amazing to do that work with Patrick and have Patrick directing, because he knew Stoppard. So that was one of my very favorite things, and we did it on weekends. We'd rehearse on weekends because we'd be shooting all week. So yes, most of us had a theater background, and that was really important, because that's one of the things for the last 7 years, I just stepped down. I was artistic director for a theater in Los Angeles, and we did new plays, and I still do new plays. And I sell all my Star Trek stuff to raise money for these productions, and I do all of that because I do love theater, and the themes of most of the plays are very Star Trek in a way. It's not just sci-fi, sometimes it is, but it's also themes about tolerance, racism, immigration, the way we treat our children in our culture, just a lot of things like that. And that's, to me, the writers of Star Trek were very smart, and they were interested in that sort of thing. And so I find that it did influence me, because I'm trying to find plays that sort of, in my own little way, carry on that idea of trying to make the world a more progressive and more tolerant place.
Nice. That's wonderful. I do think a huge benefit of sci-fi is making something that's maybe hard for our society to accept about itself more allegorical or More of a fable about
Yep,
it.
Yep, I think that's true. That heightened realism or whatever, that people can sort of get into an idea and get it. And at the same thing, you know, a lot of the costumes that people wear and the creatures, they're like, they're heightened realism. They're not real, but they are imagined. And in every major culture, I think, there have been things like masks, or, you know, it's a way that we can learn. It's the way that we can take stories that are bigger than ourselves, but we can really get a message from it and not be so psychologically involved that we can't see the forest for the trees. Another question?
Yeah, who's next?
One second.
Oh, they're fighting over Marlon. There's enough to go around.
My question is, in Generations, you were one of 2 prominent female characters, and in all of the Starfleet characters, you're the only one that had a coat on. Was that by design? Did you have any input on that? Or was it just to say, okay, well, this is supposed to be the sexy bitch, and this is supposed to be the one with the
Well,
head
there
on
was
her
a bit
shoulder?
of that. There was a bit of, you know, there was a bit of that. It was always a little unclear. There was also a period where I was in wigs, which made me look older and more matronly. But it got confusing because I wish I could really remember, but I have the feeling that I asked for something that occasionally had pockets just because it was so cold sometimes on the set. So I think Bill Tice did that original jacket, which I loved. And then it became this huge, like, lab coat that was very... So that was odd, but I'll tell you when it came in handy was when I was pregnant. And that lab coat got huge. And I had my first romantic, not with Picard, but my first romantic episode was when I was 8 months pregnant. Maybe 7 or 8 months pregnant. And he looked at me when the guest star walked in and he went, "Are you kidding?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, we are gonna be doing a lot of shots from here up, you know." A lot of behind the big chairs in the observation lounge and stuff
See,
like that.
I thought you had a special glow, but I thought it was just the chemistry.
Yeah, oh man, see, there you go. No, that was the host, which actually I adored that script. I was so proud that we had a gay writer, and it was something that actually started to. It was the first time Star Trek had ever even broached the idea of homosexuality and what is love. I thought it was so provocative and cool. Just like I think First Contact is so cool, the idea of Prime Directive, do you get involved, do you not get involved? And I love the fact that my character was the Hippocratic Oath of like, look, I can stop this suffering, and what do we do? And I always would get in trouble because I would try to help people with their suffering. But it is a really important question to look at philosophically, you know? And so that's something that Gene Roddenberry really put his finger on. I think that was excellent. Next question?
Are you a
Was it-
medical officer?
Am I a medical officer?
This guy.
I'm one of your medical officers, yes. So was it difficult after the series was over to shed the persona of Beverly and move forward?
No, not at all. Not at all, because there were a few of us who were really like super ready. And again, you have to understand, I was the only one who had a little child. I mean, you know, it was tough. You know, I was so fortunate compared to someone who has a job as a waiter. I could actually take my son to work with me, right? I mean, how fortunate is that? I could nurse him. I could, you know, but I wanted to spend some time, and I also, I just was ready to have a little bit of light, like I got in Oahu, which was fantastic, and then I spent time. I love theater, and I spent time going back and working on, as I said, new plays and doing new things. I also have. I don't know if you guys know, but I mean, I've taught at universities and conservatories for about 35 years in the United States. Tisch School of the Arts, the grad program, USC. I was on the faculty at USC, University of Pittsburgh. I taught at Harvard. I taught at Brooklyn, American Academy of Dramatic Arts, Brandeis University, lots of schools. And I love teaching people who really are they already know they want to do it seriously. I'm not so great trying to work with I would not be good with middle school and younger because I'm not as patient. I like people who already they know they're willing to walk the walk and they've chosen it. And then I don't want to have to grade them, but that's the unfortunate part. But I love how much I can learn and what the feedback is and everything. I really like that. I like the fact that I could be teaching a class and then they would go watch a performance in New York and they would see if I could walk the walk. I mean, that keeps you honest, and I feel that was an important part of my life as well. So I mean, I've had this eclectic career. I've done the choreography. I don't know, it just has happened. I never was sort of looking for anything. I wasn't looking for the job of Star Trek, but life is that way. So, you know, I do brain surgery on weekends in LA. So in that way, it did help me a lot. But all my patients died, just like on Star Trek.
Worst doctor? No. Next question.
Hello.
Hi.
I've been a Star Trek fan since I guess 14 years old. You're the first Star Trek celebrity I've ever seen before. I think it's long overdue, obviously. I think I can safely say for behalf of everyone, it's been a great time. This Hawaii's first comic book convention. Just meeting the celebrities and finding out their Hawaii connection, how small or big. Kind of hate to maybe break down the positivity by asking a question about Star Trek Nemesis, but I thought it was a pretty good film. I gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. Just as the film itself, the finished project itself, what's your opinion on the movie?
Oh, you know, I thought it was a really interesting script. I think not everything worked, but I thought it was a very interesting script. I don't think I'm the right one to judge, because when I'm in a movie, it's different if you're directing and you're outside, but when you're inside, you're doing your part, and I had a small part. So I loved the story that Brent came up with. I really thought it was quite interesting, and Brent and John. And Tom Hardy is a remarkable actor. It's just kind of like, you know, my favorite of the movies was First Contact, clearly. I felt that one was for me. I thought Jonathan did an amazing job. I thought everything kind of was, the synchronicity was right. But that's not to say that the other ones, you know, they're just different. I think what happened, in my opinion, is they did it too fast. They needed more time in between. You know, you don't just do 7 years and then boom, boom, boom. It was, you don't have enough time to develop the script, to have pre-production, to really go into it. And so that's kind of my 2 cents on it. But I mean, the people in it, it looks beautiful. I'm sorry, I don't have anything more pithy to say about it, but that's about it.
Ooh, we got a question down here.
What can you tell us about the terrific episode with you all by yourself on the starship with the Traveler on the outside and Wesley?
Oh, Remember Me, yeah. Well, I loved that episode. It was really interesting, I thought. And at the time, they didn't really have the budget to do some of the shots that they wanted to do. They really wanted me to be running and having that spaceship really disappear. And it could have been phenomenal. I mean, it really could have been great. But it was a cool thing to sort of be alone on the ship and to think about it in that way. So it was cool. It was great. I had trouble a couple times keeping my wig on in that episode, but other than that, you know, and it's more fun when you're acting with someone else, of course. And there's no question about that. Like, I'd much rather be doing a day-to-day where we're working on something and you know, you're actively involved. I had a great time working on the tap dance sequence with Brent, and I was 3 months pregnant there. Yeah, and I did not have the lab coat, I just want you to know. But anyway, yeah, it was different. I think my favorite overall time, which might surprise some of you, but my favorite time was directing Genesis. I know it's not a typical Star Trek script, it's more of a scary movie script, but I found it so fascinating to be able to do shots that I had wanted to have done in the sickbay, for example. Like, it had always been the same shots, to actually be able to choreograph some shots in sickbay and to have the ship be messy. Oh my God, I loved it, you know? And the makeup that Michael Westmore did, you know, the studio, a couple of departments wanted to nominate that episode for the Emmys, and the studio would not let them. The studio ultimately said, no, we want it to be All Good Things. And the makeup was great on All Good Things, but the makeup on Genesis was brilliant. And he should have been nominated for that. And the editing department wanted to also nominate it, and they insisted it was, another episode. But I thought it was a cool episode. I loved doing it, and that was the most fun I had. And we even had the earthquake during the middle of that shoot, that big Northridge earthquake. And some of the crew, one guy was stuck in his shower for it was like really intense. And they showed up. People could have had 2 days off, some of the crew people, because of the earthquake, and they showed up because they were friends and they wanted to support me directing. It was just so cool. It was really, really nice. So I have a great memory of that.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, they could have used the teleporters to get that guy out of there, but
But they didn't.
union rules probably. Next question.
So I like hearing a lot of stuff about behind the scenes. Who was the worst at cracking up in the middle of a scene?
Everything is subjective, okay? I think the one who lost it the most would be Michael Dorn, because he also would forget lines the most. And so sometimes that would just be ridiculous. I think I was the messiest. I would have be blowing out the candles on the set for the birthday thing and get it all over my chest. Like I'd hit the cake and and they'd go, oh shit, we got to stop. We got to get her a new uniform. So I was that. And definitely I remember one time where we had holes in our uniforms because we had had some big attack and, blood dripping and everything. And Patrick, I think, said to me, oh, what, did your pizza drip all over you? It's because I was always the one. I would pick up any food and 3 costume people would get up, you know what I mean? Oh, God, what's she going to do this time,
You're probably just cold and trying to cover yourself.
I was just bad. Because I just didn't think about it. It took me a long time which most people would be like, duh. I didn't get I was someone who didn't wear makeup really until I did Star Trek. And so I was I would just put my hand and the makeup people would be like, could you please not touch your face? Could you please not do that? I would wipe the eyebrow off, as I was doing, and they're like, please. I did not get things. I really was. I was I don't know, they put a bunch of bags of sand. So that means you're supposed to stop, right? You get to this and you're doing it and the camera's moving and you're going, well, and you're supposed to get to it and you're supposed to stop. I would go over it. I would go like it was a technical challenge to a choreographer. I was like, what was I thinking? But I seriously would. I'd go I can do this. I can do this. I can go over and they'll never know I'm going up and down. And they're like, cut. Gates, we put those there so you would stop. Oh, I'm sorry. Really, it was a different concept. I was so much a movement choreographer. Even in Labyrinth, I actually choreographed all of those magical things because I didn't realize the camera could just cut and do it. Really, wow. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just this visceral, you have to do it. And then they could have cut it any number of ways, so it was kind of crazy.
Well, if Michael was the worst at cracking up, who was the worst instigator?
Oh, God, Jonathan was pretty naughty. Brent would do the wisecracks. I thought I was the practical joker. Of course, they all say, no, nobody did that. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess they didn't go over too well. But, I do specifically remember doing several things which I categorized as practical jokes, like when we were doing Descent. I had been the ship's captain. So Patrick had been in the Borg stuff, and he was like, oh, God, the makeup and all that. And I redecorated the bridge for our first rehearsal when we came on Monday morning, and we had 6 or 7 a.m. And I had all of these guys who were extras. I asked them to sort of strip down to the waist and just be there. And then I had curlers in my hair and a bathrobe on, and I had a champagne thing right by the captain's chair. And I had put pictures of my son, Wesley Crusher, up all over. And, and I thought that would be pretty funny. And Patrick, who's so nearsighted, he walks on, he doesn't see anything, and we just start rehearsing the scene. It was very funny. And then, you know, whatever. But, and I went, oh, darling, I thought you were dead. But no, he lived. Locutus was taken away. But, and you know, Brent was funny, Patrick was funny, Marina was funny. All of them were funny. It's just, whatever. The vibe of our guest star, sometimes we shocked our guest stars. And it was like upsetting because they're just coming into it. But the reason we did that is because, you know, you're standing for so many hours and it's very serious stuff all the time. Star Trek was pretty serious all the time. And that was a way of letting off steam, and you'd kind of relax. And then when you really had to do it, boom, you'd do it. But a lot of waiting around in the group shots, too.
Thank you. Next question.
Just curious, when did you realize that you wanted to be an actor? Were you a very young person, or was it later?
Well, you know, it's interesting. If my mother was here, maybe she could tell you more, because I think my mother wanted me to become an actress. I think I wanted to become an architect, but I started dancing lessons when I was 2.5, so I don't think I was too cognizant of what was going on. And then I was, you know, just tap, toe, ballet. I mean, the beginning, it was just like, see the way I tap my feet. See the, you know, it was like, now, Mom, Dad, aren't you proud of me? It was that kind of stuff, you know. But then, yeah, I know, it was cute. But then it became, you know, all of this stuff and, you know, and whatever, and ballet and tap, which I love. I still tap. I love tap. But then my mother, you know, I was in Ohio, and then I was doing modeling on the Paige Palmer show as a little girl, and really didn't like it. And but I loved when I started to do acting at about age, I started when I was 8 to take lessons. And I loved all of the stuff because the more you could get into character, I really loved getting into a character. So I did it from that point on, and I really, really liked it. So I guess age 8. I was always pushed to perform. I'm not sure that was what I really wanted to do, but I think I'm an introvert who was taught to be an extrovert, if that makes sense. But like I'm pretending to be an extrovert now, you know. But if I were backstage, I'd be, oh God, you know. So that's that. But that's life.
That's life.
10 minutes.
Ooh, we have 10 minutes. Speed round. Who's up next? We got one. Oh, we got one.
One right here. Go ahead. Why don't you ask me? Yeah. What was it like to play a single mother? I actually thought it was awesome that Gene had put that in. By then he had a son. I think it was so significant that Next Generation had families and had children on board. I always wish they would have done more with seniors, to be honest. I asked about that a bunch because I thought, you know, are there sort of, what happens? How do people die? What happens on the ship? That could have been a really cool episode.
And it's a science vessel.
Totally, you know? Right. What?
Tisk, tisk.
Ooh, okay. But it was great, and that was one of the things I would actually talk about a lot. And I got into trouble because I knew a lot of single moms. And they were the ones that the kids would come home when they had real problems. They would talk to their moms about it too. And I felt that every time on the ship, when Wesley really needed to talk to someone, it was always Picard or Jonathan's character. And I thought, now wait a minute, she's the one who has helped to make him this genius who is saving our ass. How many times did he save the episodes? Can't we have them actually talking like intellectual? Because I have a 24-year-old. We just this morning were 45 minutes on the phone, and we were talking like two people who are artists in our own way. You know, he's an artist, and those are my most memorable conversations with a child, are the ones where you actually see them for who they are, and it's really cool, and you kind of think they're seeing you not just as mom, but actually seeing you as someone who's done other things. So I felt it was a great step that they did it. I felt they could have gone further. I felt that it stayed a little bit too banal in a way. It was like a little bit only worrying about, obviously, his life. But I think it would have been really interesting to have had something, I don't know in your experience or if you agree, but where you disagree, and then we actually come together and we have something where we develop something together. That would have been, to me, like a lot of people I know who are single parents, be it male, female. It's a lot. So anyway.
For what it's worth, I watched the show with my mother who was raising me alone, and we found moments in what you did that were like, oh, that resonates with us.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nice to know.
Thank you. Next question.
I was wondering if you could go back and do anything different or change the character in any way you wanted, would you?
Other than have her be captain? No. You know, I don't know. I would have liked, it's just like what I said, little things here and there about episodes on things that interested me. I find there's a lot of things we are all facing, all of us in this room, about mortality and cancer and all kinds of things that we are, Alzheimer's. There's so many things that we're just learning about. My father died of ALS, and my mother died of cancer within a year of each other. So we are all, there are many issues that we could work on, and I would have loved to have seen more about that, about how do we treat the elderly, and how do we deal with education, actually to see how we educated, so stuff like that would have been really interesting, and more philosophical stuff, because I really like that. I like questions like in Symbiosis. You've got a planet of people addicted. What do you do? What's your responsibility? I think one of the things, and I was talking about this with someone from your state legislature day before yesterday, the world is so complex. There are no easy answers, and I find time after time people want easy answers, and they're not really there. You have to be able to look and understand that there's ambivalence in the world. There's ambivalence inside me. You know, I'll like something but not like all of it, and you know, and that's life, and we have to sort of find a way to be positive about it and not get totally freaked out and paralyzed by the complexities. We have to vote. We have to do things that just do the best we can to keep it going forward.
5 minutes. We have a question back here.
I told you she was smart. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, would you mind talking a little bit more about your work in Labyrinth?
Sure. So when I started Labyrinth with Jim, I had done another movie that you should Google sometime and watch it. I'm sure it's on Netflix. It's called Dream Child. And I had done a couple things with him before, and he wanted me to teach acting to his puppeteers, which is what I did also in Labyrinth, and I worked with Jennifer Connelly, who, one of the most beautiful women. Oh my God, she was beautiful at 14, and look at her now. Anyway, I wasn't sure this was what I wanted to get into because it was so much animatronics, because I was going to be doing puppet movements. So he put me on Dream Child, and I had 1 week. He took me to London, introduced me to the studio, showed me the script, and he left. And he went back to New York. And I'm like, oh my God, I think that was my test, and I didn't know that was my test. So I had 1 week to do all of those scenes, and at that time it was the state of the art. Now it's, you would laugh. We had people doing the eyes. There were 2 or 3 people on the eyes and the jaw, and they're all doing remote controls. And then I had the actors who were doing the voices, and then I had the live actress who would be on the set at the same time. I mean, it was like amazing. And if one thing broke down, we'd have to stop filming. So I would do it for the director. I would put things on tape, and I'd say, is this the way? I would direct it, and then I'd say, is this what you would like? And then he would either, he'd give me notes. So I passed the test on that, even though it was, it's a beautiful movie, but it was tough. Ian Holm was brilliant in this movie. So then when it was Labyrinth, we walked in. I was the first person with Jim. We walked into an empty stages. They were just empty spaces, huge, in the studios, Elstree Studios. And then by the time the show was going, it was just packed with masks and things. He had such artists working on the puppets and the costumes. And then I started working with a fabulous little person named Sherry, who played Hoggle. And she and I had the same birthday. It was March 2nd. We were both not in the same year, but we were born on the same day. And she was quite wonderful. It was very difficult. She was a dwarf, and she had very tiny hands. And so she's, first of all, she was female, but she's playing a male. And she had to have these big, big artificial hands. It was very exhausting work. She was fantastic. So I worked a lot with her initially, and I was teaching like the Ron Mueck, who played Ludo. I was working with the puppeteers a lot, just doing acting stuff and looking at the script. And Jennifer. And then I cast all of the dancers. I got to cast the people who were in the scene in the ballroom. I think the ballroom was my most favorite thing, because you know what? I was allowed to just do it. He was busy on another stage, and just for that week, I got 1 week where I picked the dancers, and we did it, and we were just shooting and doing it, and I got to teach David Bowie the steps. I mean, come on. And, but it was great, and it was massive. You know, George Lucas came on the set one time. Like, by the time we were doing the Goblin Village at the end, we had paid, all this time had been on these remote-controlled rocks that were supposed to come down and crash and everything, but they didn't work. And so in the end, we did what Buster Keaton did in the 1920s or whatever. We tied wire to them, and they would run, and the balls would come, you know, right after them. And it's like what they did decades ago. But anyway.
State of the art.
State of the art. Well, thank you all very, very much. I appreciate that you turned out. I mean, nobody knew what was going to happen in this first Comic-Con, and I really am glad to be here, and I'm honored that I was able to be like the first person who comes here, and I know there's going to be many more, much more interesting guests, but thank you, and let me send you mucho, mucho aloha, and thank you. Thank you, too.